Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Today what we're going to start is our exploration of the Odyssey by Homer. And this is really going to dominate a lot of what we do in the fourth quarter. Is going to be rotating around this. Now, the Odyssey is an epic poem. It's almost 600 pages long when you read it in translated form. I know that probably just spooked you a bit. Don't worry, we're not reading all 600 pages. We're going to read excerpts that the textbook has for us. And what the textbook has done is what I would have done if I were doing this. What I used to do, in fact, when I would do it on my own, which is to say it's an important work, one that you will hopefully visit many times in your life, but you kind of need to be introduced to it in small forms and to kind of digestible bites. And that's what we are going to do. So why are we studying it all? So we have the Odyssey written by Homer, and no, it's not this Homer, it's actually this Homer. And it is called by many the greatest work of all time. And in fact, many people refer to it as, they say everything ever created is simply a sequel to the Odyssey. And why do they say that? They say that because the Odyssey has the elements of every single story you've ever seen, read, heard of. They're all kind of the same at some point. And all of these elements come from this. That's why it's the greatest work of all time, because it is really the core and the seed of all fictional work. And so that's why we're going to study it. And we're going to see how it translates even into very modern literature as well. So why do we do this? Well, we look at a couple of points that all epics have and what you're going to be looking for, and how even in the Odyssey we can translate these things into more modern terms. The book I'll compare this with is The Catcher in the Rye, which we studied earlier this year. So take the epic at a glance. You have first the epic hero. What makes the epic hero the epic hero? First, he possesses some kind of superhuman strength, craftiness, confidence. In the case of the Odyssey, that's going to be Odysseus. We'll get to him later. But every time you watch some kind of a hero, it's because they have some kind of quality to them that makes them stand out. Otherwise, there's no point in watching them. In the case of The Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield is highly intelligent. And he is clever. Almost more so than he should be, and it's to his detriment. They're helped or harmed by interfering gods. Certainly, in this case, for Holden, yes. Forces greater than himself are changing the way that his story goes. One would argue that the death of his brother really does that and creates an entire character arc for him. They embody the ideals and values that a culture considers admirable. He's a bizarre case because, he has the wealth that we certainly consider, the intelligence that we consider. He's a good-looking kid by the way everyone describes him. But he also is very self-searching and soul-searching, and that's kind of important. And he emerges victorious from perilous situations. Certainly he does. Now, not all stories do, and we'll get to more of that later. They all have an epic plot. Now, I'm not going to spend as much time on this today, but except just to notice that in all of our stories, we have to have some kind of strange creature. I would say if you translate that into like a high school comedy, there's always the weird oddball character, either the student who's the outsider or the teacher who's just bizarre. And you have large-scale events, treacherous weather, simply obstacles. They're things that get in the way. And again, if we didn't have that kind of conflict, we'd have no story. And then divine intervention, which I'm going to look at in a later slide. The setting matters. Okay? When you have any kind of story, your setting is tremendous. And when you think about it, all stories at some level have a setting that is at some point fantastic or exotic to someone. There's no universal setting. It doesn't exist. And they're weird or bizarre in some way, even if they're normal, an average home, an average office, an average high school. There's something about it that's odd, and that's what makes it engaging. Now, in the case of an epic, we have several, usually. And they usually involve what we call more than one nation. take something like The Catcher in the Rye, you do and you don't. You have several different kinds of people. A lot of that is Holden Caulfield himself is very wealthy. He deals with other people who are not so wealthy and kind of can't understand them. And then you deal with him having been in Pennsylvania, then going back to New York City, and being in various places in New York City, whether he's in the wealthy, Upper West Side where he lives, or if he's downtown when he's kind of slumming it, so to speak. This is the slide I want us to focus on the most, that we're going to get the most out of, and it's the archetype. Yes, I noticed up here they left out the guide. I wrote that in. What are archetypes? Look at this and think of the word stereotype. Archetypes are like literary stereotypes. They're these typical characters that you have over and over again. And again, every work of literature has learned to incorporate at least one, if not many, of these. So for instance, you have the sea monster, which you have in early epics, mostly because that was their mode of transportation, was the sea. But it's any kind of monster. It's any kind of villain who gets in the way of the story, but they're usually brief. So for instance, in The Catcher in the Rye, that's Shredletter. He's your sea monster. That's Maurice, the elevator operator in the hotel who beats him up when he won't give him enough money. Those are the monsters. But they're only a small part of the story. You have the Wicked Temptress. The Wicked Temptress's job is to convince the hero to give up his journey and to just take the easy way out and just give up. And we're going to see that in the Odyssey. Where do you see it in The Catcher in the Rye? You see it really with Sally Hayes. She tries to convince Holden, give up on all of this thinking and this introspection, just go to school and be like everybody else. And if you do that, you will end up with a life where you go to a nice school, you get a really nice job, you make a lot of money just like your dad, and you get to marry a beautiful girl like me who knows how to be a socialite. It's everything that everyone else wants. So she is the temptress in that case. Odysseus deals with a couple of those along the way. Buried treasure. There's some object, and this happens in almost every story, that if you can acquire the object, everything is just better. But you got to find it. Where does Holden Caulfield do that? With the Little Shirley Beans record. He can't find it. It's really rare. And when he does find it, he breaks it, showing that the object is not what's so important. It's the journey. There's this suitors contest. We'll get to that one later on as well, which is the idea that at some point the character has to prove himself to everyone, which Holden does and doesn't do. It's got our hero, and then it's got the loyal servant, which I also say works as the guide. That's somebody who's giving them wise advice the whole time. In Holden's case, he has many. He just doesn't listen to any of them. He has Mr. Spencer in the beginning. He has Mr. Antolini later on. He even has Phoebe. He just ignores all of them as much as they're all trying to help him. But I want you to keep an eye on the idea of archetypes, especially when you see the next assignment that goes with this. And then finally we have themes. Themes that are reflective in almost every single work that, somebody has to have courage. Why? There has to be a conflict. So if there's got to be a conflict, you have to have the courage to overcome that. The fate of a nation. Nation is a very large term here. It could simply be it's the fate of a household, the fate of a friend group. It's some group, whether it's a clique, a family, a team. Their fate rests on this and could be lost as well. A homecoming, which is part of the reason why this is such a big deal. At some point, a character has to go out and explore the world and then come back home better for the experience. And that's what Holden Caulfield does. He goes out into the world, learns about it the hard way, and comes home a more enlightened human being. There are discussions of what beauty is. There are always tests of loyalty. And in almost every story, at some point, there's an issue of life and death. Okay, so these are the major themes that we're going to be looking at. And when you see the assignment that's posted in here, you're going to see how you can find at least one of these things on one of these slides in any story you've ever seen. Part of the thing with the Odyssey is it's so old, but it's also so huge. It can't not contain all of these elements, and that's why every story is basically a sequel to the Odyssey. Hope this has been helpful today. Keep an eye on the classroom and you'll see what the next assignment is for this. Have a good day. Be well, everybody.